5 stories. One night. Don't fall asleep too early.
I took the night security job because it paid well, asked few questions, and came with the kind of silence you only get far from towns and roads. The kind of work where nothing happens, and that's the point. Where you sit in a control room with stale coffee and flickering monitors and count hours instead of problems. And when the contractor emailed me the location, I remember frowning at my screen because the address didn't pull up on any map app I tried. Not satellite, not street view, not even the old offline maps I kept on my phone. Just a blank stretch of forest and a service road with no name. But the instructions were clear enough that I figured it was one of those facilities that like to stay off the books. Research parks, data centers, places that existed more as ideas than buildings. And I needed the money badly enough that I didn't push it. The gate was already open when I arrived just before midnight. A tall fence swallowed by fog. The keypad dark, but the arm lifted like it recognized me. And beyond it the road curved inward, swallowed by trees, my headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through mist until the facility emerged ahead of me, low and wide and ugly, all concrete and metal, no sign, no logo, just a block of structure squatting in the dark like it had grown there. Inside, the control room was smaller than I expected. A desk bolted to the floor, 6 monitors mounted on the wall showing different angles of the same place. Long corridors, loading bays, stairwells, all identical in that institutional way that makes it hard to tell where you are, even when you're looking straight at it. And on the desk, neatly stacked, was a folder with my name printed on the front in plain black text. Inside the folder was a single sheet of paper titled Rules for Night Security, and before I even read them, I felt that little warning prickle at the base of my skull, the one that usually comes when something is wrong, but not wrong enough yet to justify leaving. The rules were short, typed, numbered, written in calm, professional language, like a safety manual. And they read, 1. Do not respond to voices on channel 3. 2. If a hallway repeats on camera, turn off the monitor immediately. 3. At 0217, all interior doors must be unlocked. 4. If a maintenance worker asks for help, say, "You already finished." 5. Do not conduct exterior patrols after 3 a.m. Beneath the list was a final line in smaller font. If a rule is broken, follow correction instructions exactly. I stood there for a while with the paper in my hand, listening to the hum of the lights, telling myself that every weird job had a quirk, that voices probably meant interference, that repeating hallways were camera glitches, that the maintenance line was some internal joke, and that the door unlock thing was probably for automated systems that ran overnight. But it was that last line that stuck with me. The casual assumption that rules would be broken, not punished immediately, just corrected. Like errors in a process, the first hour passed quietly, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. The monitors showing empty corridors, the occasional flicker of static rolling through like distant rain, and when Channel 3 lit up on the radio panel for the first time, I felt a spike of alertness, but it was just a burst of white noise, sharp and brief, and then it went dead again. And I laughed under my breath and made a note in the log like a good employee. It wasn't until after one that I noticed the first thing that didn't fit. One of the corridor feeds, showing the same stretch of hallway, twice in a row, the same fire extinguisher on the left wall. The same scuff mark on the floor, the same exit sign flickering, looping back on itself in a way that made my eyes slide off it. And I stared for a second too long, trying to figure out if the camera had frozen or if my brain was just tired. And then I remembered Rule 2 and felt a small jolt of adrenaline. But instead of shutting the monitor off immediately like it said, I hesitated, my finger hovering over the switch while I leaned closer, squinting. And in that hesitation, the image snapped back to normal, the hallway extending forward the way it should. And nothing happened. No alarm, no scream, no punishment. Just a return to boring normality. And I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, convinced I'd just imagined it. About 30 seconds later, a soft chime sounded from the desk, and a new sheet of paper slid out of the small printer mounted beneath the monitors. The paper warm when I picked it up, and printed on it was a single sentence. Correction required. Reset camera feed at 2 before 2 a.m. My heart thudded harder than it should have, because that meant two things at once. That I had fact broken a rule, and that the facility knew it, but also that nothing terrible had happened yet, just a task, a fix, like the system was forgiving, as long as I complied. The reset was simple, a button press on the control panel, the feed blinking out and back in, and when I did it, the printer stayed silent. No further instructions, and the sense of unease ebbed just enough for me to keep going. That was when I started to believe the rules were more like guidelines, that mistakes were expected, that as long as you corrected them, you were fine. And that belief is what made the second mistake possible. It happened just before 2, when Channel 3 crackled again, louder this time, and instead of pure static, there was a rhythm to it, a pattern that made my brain want to lean into it, and then, under the noise, something that almost sounded like a voice saying my name. Not clearly, not fully formed, but close enough that I reacted without thinking. My thumb hitting the talk button, as I said, "Control here." And the moment the words left my mouth, I felt cold wash through me, because Rule 1 wasn't ambiguous at all, and I'd just broken it cleanly. Channel 3 went silent, the other feeds flickering once like a collective blink, and for a long, awful second, nothing happened. And then, the printer word again, louder this time, more urgent, and the paper it spat out had 2 lines instead of 1. Correction required, isolate channel, 3 immediately, correction required, complete before 2:17. I checked the clock and felt my stomach tighten, because 2:17 was the time listed in Rule 3, the time when all doors had to be unlocked, and now I had 2 tasks with overlapping windows, one explicit and one implied, and suddenly the rules didn't feel like friendly guidelines anymore. They felt like a schedule, a tight one. Isolating Channel 3 meant physically going to the communications room down the hall, pulling a breaker, something I hadn't planned to do that night. But I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the control room. The corridor colder than before, the hum of the building deeper, almost like breathing. And as I walked, I became aware of another sound layered under my footsteps, a faint, distant clatter like tools being set down. And I remembered Rule 4 and felt my pulse quicken. The communications room was where it was supposed to be, a metal door with a faded label, and inside the breaker box was clearly marked. And when I pulled it, the lights flickered, and the radio panel on my belt went dead. Channel 3 gone, and I felt a brief, foolish surge of pride at having fixed it in time. I was halfway back to the control room, when a figure stepped out from a side corridor ahead of me. Tall, wearing a maintenance uniform that looked too clean at first glance. Reflective stripes dull in my flashlight beam. And he raised a hand in a casual wave and said, "Hey, can you give me a hand with something?" And my mind raced. Rule 4 flashing bright and clear, and I opened my mouth to say the phrase exactly as written. But before I could, he smiled, and something about the smile made me pause, just for a fraction of a second, because it wasn't threatening or strange. It was tired, familiar, like someone at the end of a long shift, and that pause was enough for him to tilt his head and add, "Never mind. I think I already finished." And then he stepped back into the corridor and was gone, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and the bitter realization that I hadn't said the line at all, that I'd broken another rule by omission this time, not by action. And I didn't even know what the correction would be. The printer answered that question a minute later when I got back to the control room, the paper sliding out in a hurry, the text bolded in places, correction required, confirm maintenance completion, locate maintenance worker, and issue phrase, complete before 2:30. 3 corrections now, stacked like weights, and the clock ticking steadily towards 2:17. The doors task looming like a wall I still had to hit. I started unlocking the doors early, moving down the list on the panel, watching each indicator flip from red to green, my fingers moving faster as the seconds slipped away. And that's when I noticed one of the corridor feeds starting to loop again. Not fully, just a subtle stutter. The same section repeating with a slight delay. And I swore under my breath because I didn't have time to deal with another correction. And I turned the monitor off without thinking, the screen going black, and the printer stayed silent. Mercifully, but the sense of pressure didn't ease. It built, a tightness in my chest that made every breath shallow. At 2:16, with one door left, the panel froze, the indicator refusing to change, and on. The black monitor I'd just shut off. A faint reflection appeared, my own face ghosted in the dark glass, and behind it, just barely, the outline of the maintenance worker standing too close, his mouth opening as if to speak, and the printer screamed to life, the paper tearing slightly as it fed through. The message short and brutal. Correction failed. Manual intervention required. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. My body just moved, out of the control room, down the corridor toward the stuck door. The building's hum rising in pitch, lights flickering in waves ahead of me, and as I reached the door, the clock hit 2:17, and every unlocked indicator flashed green at once. The sound like a breath being released, except the door in front of me stayed stubbornly red. Behind me, footsteps echoed, slow and unhurried, and I knew without looking who it was, and that I was out of time, that I couldn't complete all the tasks, that the system was designed to overload you eventually, to stack small forgivable mistakes until there was no clean solution left. That realization hit with a strange clarity, and instead of panicking, I stopped, my hand on the door, and thought about the rules not as commandments, but as assumptions, about how every correction so far had been about restoring order, about keeping things running, and how none of them had considered the possibility of someone simply leaving. Rule 5 said not to patrol outside after 3 a.m., not that you couldn't go outside at all. And Rule 3 demanded doors be unlocked, but it didn't say you had to stay inside once they were. And the more I thought about it, the more obvious it became that the system tracked compliance, not escape. The footsteps behind me paused, close enough that I could hear fabric shift, and the maintenance worker's voice came again. Calm, almost kind, "You're behind schedule." And instead of turning around, instead of fixing the door, I made my choice, deliberate and clear, and broke one last rule on purpose by pulling the fire exit lever beside me, the alarm shrieking as the door burst open and cold night air rushed in. The sudden contrast, like diving into water. The lights inside flared, every monitor in the control room blowing out to white for a split second before going dark, the printer spitting out one final sheet that fluttered uselessly to the floor, unread, and I ran into the fog, not looking back. The sound of the alarm cutting off abruptly behind me as the building seemed to shudder and settle, like something winding down. I didn't stop until I reached my car, hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys, and when I looked back, the facility was dark and silent. No hum, no flicker, just a slab of concrete under the stars, and for the first time since I'd arrived, it felt empty. I reported the incident the next day, vague and careful. Electrical faults, malfunctioning equipment, nothing about voices or rules. And when I went to pull up the address to file the paperwork, it still didn't exist. Just a blank patch of forest, and the contractor never returned my calls. Weeks later, the folder showed up in my mailbox, the same one from the control room, empty except for a new sheet of paper that read, "Status, unresolved. Chapter closed." I didn't take another night job after that, but sometimes, just before sleep, I think about how easy it was to make the first mistake, how forgiving the system felt at the start, and how close I came to believing that fixing things was the same as being safe. And I wonder how many people are still in places like that, correcting small errors, following rules that were never meant to be finished, unaware that the only real solution was to stop playing along and leave while they still could. I took a night fire watch job in the forest because I needed money. The divorce didn't hit all at once. It came in pieces. Lawyer fees that kept stacking. Rent on a place that felt too big and too quiet. Groceries that suddenly mattered more than they used to. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that things would settle down, but they never really did. What I needed more than the money was space, distance, a reason to not be around people for a while without having to explain myself. I didn't want coworkers asking how I was doing. I didn't want friends checking in. I wanted something solitary, something simple. A job where nothing was expected of me except showing up and staying awake. That's why the fire watch listing caught my attention. Night fire watch. 1 week contract, no experience required. Good pay, isolated location. I remember rereading that last part a few times. Isolated location. That sounded like exactly what I needed. All you had to do was sit in a tower, watch the forest, and report smoke if you saw any. No patrols, no hiking, no interaction. Just you, a radio, and a view. I told myself it would be like a reset, a quiet place to think, maybe even sleep a little better. The drive out there took longer than I expected. The road narrowed the farther I went, turning from pavement to gravel, then to something that barely deserved to be called a road at all. Trees closed in on both sides. My phone lost signal about 10 minutes before I reached the tower, the screen flashing between bars, and nothing before giving up completely. The tower sat on a small rise, surrounded by forest in every direction. Old wood, weathered grey, the stairs creaked even when the wind pushed against them. At the top was a single room, a narrow bed pushed against one wall, a desk bolted to the floor, a radio mounted beside it, a small window on each side, giving a full view of the trees. During the day, it felt calm, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. The forest looked wide and open, tall trees, plenty of space between them, light filtering down through the branches. I could see far in every direction. Nothing felt wrong. I unpacked slowly, clothes folded into the corner, food lined up on the desk. I sat on the bed for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. For the first time in a long time, my head felt quiet. An hour before sunset, my phone buzzed. One last notification before the signal disappeared completely. An email. Subject line: night shift procedures. There was a single attachment, a PDF. The file name was just one word: rules. That should have been my first warning. I opened it and started reading. Rule 1. Stay inside the tower after sunset. Do not leave for any reason before sunrise. That sounded reasonable. Night visibility was poor. Wildlife. Uneven ground. I nodded to myself and kept reading. Rule 2. The forest will look closer than it did during the day. This is normal. Do not measure the distance. That one made me pause. I reread it, then read it again. The wording felt oddly specific, but I told myself it was probably meant to stop people from panicking. Depth perception changes at night. Shadows play tricks. I moved on. Rule 3. If you see lights moving between the trees, do not signal back. They are not other rangers. I frowned at that. There were no other towers listed on the map they'd sent me. Still, maybe campers, hunters, someone wandering where they shouldn't be. I didn't like it, but I kept going. Rule 4. Drumming may begin after midnight. If it sounds slow and steady, remain calm. If it speeds up, prepare to hide. That was the first time I felt a real knot form in my stomach. Rule 5. The radio may turn on by itself. If you hear chanting, do not adjust the volume. If you hear your name, do not answer. I remember letting out a quiet laugh at that. Nervous, short, the kind of laugh you give when something makes you uncomfortable, but you don't want to admit it yet. Rule 6. If the chanting stops suddenly, hide immediately. The safest place is under the bed. I looked at the bed then. Thin mattress. Barely enough clearance underneath. The kind of place you'd hide if you were a kid and thought monsters were real. Rule 7. If something enters the tower, remain completely still. Do not look directly at its legs. I didn't like how calmly that was written. Rule 8. If you smell smoke and wet earth inside the tower, it is already too close. Rule 9. Do not leave the tower during the ritual. Leaving early will make you visible. Rule 10. If you survive until sunrise, leave immediately. Do not look back at the tower once you are on the ground. That was it. No explanation. No contact information. No company logo. Just the rules. I sat there for a long time after finishing, listening to the forest, watching the light slowly change outside. I thought about packing up and leaving, about driving back before dark, but then I thought about the money, about the empty apartment waiting for me, about how badly I wanted this to be just a strange document, and nothing more. So I stayed. Sunset came faster than I expected. The light drained out of the forest like someone turning down a dimmer switch. Colors faded, details blurred. The trees became tall black shapes instead of individual trunks and branches. Shadows filled the spaces between them. That's when I noticed it. The forest looked closer, not like the trees had moved, more like the space between them had shrunk. The gaps felt tighter. The openness from earlier was gone. It felt like the forest was leaning in, just slightly, just enough for me to notice. I stepped closer to the window, instinctively trying to judge the distance. Then I stopped myself. Do not measure the distance. I stepped back and forced myself to sit down. The first few hours passed slowly, too slowly. Every sound felt louder at night. Every creak of the tower made me tense. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see something staring back at me. But there was nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. Around midnight, the drumming started. At first, I thought it was my heartbeat, or maybe blood rushing in my ears. Stress does strange things, but this was steady, even. A rhythm that didn't change when I held my breath or shifted in my chair. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It felt like the sound was being absorbed by the forest instead of bouncing back, like it was meant to be heard only from where I was sitting. I stayed still, hands folded, breathing slow. Then I saw the lights, small points of orange between the trees. One at first, then another, then more. They weren't random. They were spaced out, forming a loose circle around the tower. Not perfect, but deliberate. I didn't wave. I didn't turn on my flashlight. I remembered Rule 3 and kept my hands where they were. The radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the room, low and constant. Then voices bled through, chanting, not clear words, just syllables repeated again and again, layered over each other. The drumming outside matched the rhythm perfectly. Then I heard my name. Spoken wrong. Too slow. Like they were testing how it sounded. But clearly meant for me. Do not answer. My throat tightened. I stared at the radio and stayed silent. The drumming sped up. My chest felt tight. My palms were slick with sweat. The fires between the trees burned brighter. The chanting grew louder, faster, more urgent, like something was reaching a peak. Then everything stopped. No drums, no chanting, no wind. The silence pressed in on me, heavier than the noise had been. Hide immediately. I dropped to the floor and slid under the bed. The tower stairs creaked, one step at a time. Slow, heavy. The sound of weight being carefully placed. The door opened. Something walked inside. The floor bent under it. I saw its legs pass by the bed. They weren't human. The joints bent backward. The feet ended in hooves, split, black. Mud cracked along the edges, pressed deep into the wood like it weighed far more than it should have. Then the smell hit me. Smoke, wet soil, like burned leaves after rain. It stopped beside the bed. I could hear it breathing. Slow, controlled, not rushed, like it knew exactly where I was and wasn't worried about me going anywhere. Outside, the chanting resumed. Louder now, faster. The radio crackled, and a voice cut through the static. Do not come out. Something gripped the bed frame. Hard. The wood groaned under the pressure. Dust fell onto my face. I squeezed my eyes shut and stayed still. Then it let go. Footsteps moved away, down the stairs. Silence returned. I stayed under the bed until my legs cramped and my jaw ached from holding my breath. When I finally crawled out, the room was empty. The smell lingered. The sky outside had begun to lighten, just a little. Leave immediately. I grabbed my bag and rushed for the stairs. Halfway down, something grabbed my arm. Not rough, controlled. Like it knew exactly how much strength to use. I turned. It stood in the doorway below me, taller than the frame, skin dark and cracked like burned bark, legs thick, ending in hooves pressed deep into the wood. Two horns curved back from its skull, uneven, one chipped at the tip. Its face wasn't animal. It wasn't human. Its eyes reflected light that wasn't there. It pulled me closer. Claws slid down my forearm. 4 sharp lines burned into my skin, warm, stinging, not deep, just enough. A mark. I screamed and twisted free. I ran. Behind me, hooves hit wood, then dirt, then leaves. It followed. Not fast. It didn't need to be. The forest felt tighter now. Closer. Branches scraped my arms. Roots caught my feet. The sky brightened. Just as the sun broke over the hills, the footsteps stopped. I reached the road as daylight fully set in. My arm burned where it scratched me. I didn't look back. I don't know if the sunrise saved me, or if the mark means I'm not done with the forest yet. I didn't stay long enough to find out.
I told people it was a treasure hunt because I'm chasing gold sounds normal, and I'm chasing my father sounds like I need help. My dad vanished at sea when I was 12. Storm, rescue boats, news crews for a few days, and then silence. No body, no funeral. Just a missing person report that never stopped being open in my head. You don't get closure when the ocean keeps the evidence. You just grow around the hole and pretend it isn't there. I became a diver for the same reason people learn how to fight after they've been hurt. I wanted the world to stop feeling bigger than me. Last week, while helping my mum pack up the attic, I found my dad's old dive log sealed in a plastic box. Most of the pages were ruined, but one entry survived like it wanted to be found. Coordinates, a symbol he used to doodle when I was a kid. Triangle inside a circle, and one sentence, written like he was in a hurry. Wreck at 43 meters, cargo hold, marked chest. If anything happens to me, you'll know where I went. I read it until the words didn't look real. That wreck wasn't on any chart. I checked official maps, diving forums, even old shipping records. Nothing. Like the ocean had erased it. The smart choice would have been to hand it off to professionals. But grief doesn't care about smart. Grief wants you to touch the truth with your own hands, because you think your hands will make it gentler. I called Mara, the only diver I trust when things go wrong. She listened, quiet, and asked the only question that mattered. Are you going for treasure, or are you going for him? I didn't answer fast enough. She sighed like she already knew, and said, "One dive. If anything feels wrong, we're done." We rented a small boat and reached the coordinates just before noon. The sea looked normal from above, calm blue, small waves, but the air tasted metallic, like a storm had been there recently and left teeth marks behind. Mara pointed at the surface and made me look. A faint line in the water, like a seam. One side drifted with the current, the other side moved against it. A split current in open sea, where it shouldn't exist. Wrecks change water, she said. But that's strange. I felt that old childhood anger rise in me, hot and stupid, like the ocean was pretending it never stole anyone. We geared up. I checked my regulator twice. I touched my back up like a prayer. Mara watched me with that calm patience you only get from people who've seen panic kill. Then we rolled into the water. The cold bit through my suit. The world above muted instantly. It became breathing, bubbles, and the slow fall into darker blue. At 20 meters, the sunlight started to thin. At 30, my dive light became the only honest thing I had. At 43, the bottom finally revealed itself, and the ship appeared below us like a thought turning solid. It was lying on its side, torn open, ribs exposed. It didn't look like a wreck that had been dead for decades. It looked preserved, too preserved. The metal edges were sharp, not softened by years of growth. Mara angled her light along the hull, and I saw letters under the silt. The name, barely readable, Eidolon. Something about that word made my stomach tighten. I couldn't explain it. We found an entry hole where the deck had collapsed. Mara tied a guideline and secured it, then signaled me close. The moment we slipped inside, the silence changed. Not just quieter, wrong. Like sound was being absorbed. My ears pressed as if the ship had its own pressure. My light cut through floating dust and revealed plates scattered on the floor, a broken chair, and a child's doll wedged under a pipe. A doll had no business being intact down here. Its glass eye caught my light and shone back at me like it was watching. Mara saw it too. She didn't stop, but her posture tightened. We moved deeper through tilted corridors, past cabin doors hanging half open, curtains floating like pale skin. My dive computer beeped warnings. Time, depth, decompression limits. I kept going anyway, because I wasn't thinking like a diver. I was thinking like a son. Then the corridor opened into the cargo section, and there it was. The chest. Half buried between pipes, exactly like the logbook said. Mara's light swept across it, and her head snapped toward me like she was asking if this was worth it. I swam closer, and my blood turned cold. On the lid was the symbol. Triangle inside a circle. Carved deep. Fresh edges. Not old. Fresh. Like someone marked it recently for me. My breathing got louder in my mask. I looked around instinctively, and even though I saw nobody, the wreck suddenly felt crowded. I brushed silt off the latch. The metal under my glove felt warm. It shouldn't have, but it did. Like it had been touched. I opened it. The chest clicked like a new door lock. Inside wasn't gold. Inside was a waterproof case. And my dad's watch wrapped in cloth. The same scratched bezel. The same cracked strap. The same little chip on the face from when I dropped it as a kid. And he laughed and said, "Now it's yours too." My eyes burned. I forgot the water, forgot the rules, forgot everything. I grabbed it and held it to my chest, like it could rewind the world. Mara touched my shoulder, steadying me. Then she pointed at the waterproof case, reminding me, "Take proof." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded paper in a plastic sleeve, and a small audio recorder sealed in resin. The paper had fresh ink. My dad's handwriting again. I lifted it toward my light, and my heart stopped. "If you're reading this, you didn't listen. I'm sorry. I love you. Don't trust the voice." I stared at the sentence until it didn't feel like language. Don't trust the voice. What voice? Mara tried to take the note to read it, but I jerked it back like an idiot. The wreck groaned, a deep metal moan that vibrated through the walls. My light flickered. Mara's eyes widened. Another groan, then a crack like a gunshot, something snapping above us. The cargo bay trembled, and silt exploded into the water like a smoke bomb. Our visibility vanished in 2 seconds. My light became a pale cone, reflecting nothing but dust. I spun, trying to find the corridor back. Gone. The ship had swallowed its own exit. Mara grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the guideline. We followed it by feel through the grey soup. Then the line went slack. My stomach dropped. The guideline wasn't snapped. It was cut, clean. The end floated like a severed nerve. Mara stared at it, then at me. Even through a mask, I could see it in her eyes. Somebody did that. Her hand signs turned sharp. Abort. Now! We turned, searching for any opening, any break in the hull. My breathing sped up. I forced it down. Slow, in, out. Then my comms crackled, and a sound filled my ear that didn't belong underwater. Breathing. Close, slow. Like someone was sharing my mask. I jerked so hard my tank hit metal. Mara's head snapped toward me, asking what's wrong. The breathing continued. Then a voice came through, calm and low. Stop kicking! My blood became electricity. I knew that voice the way you know your own name. Dad? I whispered, and Bubbles swallowed the word. Mara shook her head violently and pointed at my ear unit. Take it off! But I couldn't. I couldn't move, because the voice came again, softer now, like it was trying not to scare me. You'll burn your air. Listen to me. I wanted it to be real, so badly my brain started cooperating with the lie. Where are you? I breathed. The voice answered, closer. Right here. Something gripped my wrist. A hand, fingers, firm, human, not debris, not current. A real hold that knew exactly how to guide me. Mara saw my arm move and lunged, grabbing my harness, pulling me back. But the grip pulled harder, yanking me sideways into a narrow slit between steel and crushed wood. I fought to go back to Mara, but the opening was too tight. Mara tried to wedge in after me and got stuck, her tank scraping, her shoulder pinned. I saw her light flashing frantic emergency signals. The hand tightened on my wrist like a warning. Not her. You. Panic detonated in my chest. I kicked, squeezing through metal teeth, shoulder scraping, light flickering wildly. Behind me, Mara's light faded as the ship swallowed distance. I was alone. The passage opened into a small pocket of clearer water, and I stopped, floating, trembling. My light steadied and revealed a chamber that didn't belong in a wreck. The walls looked reinforced, cleaner, like someone built a room inside the dead ship, and in the center was an upright door. Not a hatch. A door, like you'd find in a hallway on land. A brass plate on it read, Eidolon. Beneath it, another plate with one word. Replacement. My lungs forgot how to work. The voice in my ear sounded broken now, like it hurt to speak. I tried to stop you. Where is Mara? I gasped. She can still leave, the voice said. You came for me. The door handle turned by itself. The door opened inward. The darkness behind it wasn't water dark. It was deeper, like the absence of light. And from inside came a low hum, like a crowd whispering all at once. My skin prickled under my suit. The voice warned, Don't look inside. I couldn't help it. My light flickered, and in the split second it worked, it illuminated shapes beyond the doorway. Rows of figures sitting like passengers, perfectly still, facing outward. And one seat was empty. The empty seat had something on it that made my stomach fold in half. A name tag. My name. The whispering rose, more excited now. A new voice slid into my comms, warm and familiar. My mother's voice. Please, it begged, shaking. Come home. He's here. I felt my body lean forward before my mind caught up. That wasn't possible. My mother was alive. But grief doesn't care about possible. It cares about want. My father's voice snapped, furious. No, it learns you. The hand yanked my wrist back. It tries different faces until one fits. The whispering in the doorway sharpened into words. Step in. My air gauge dipped toward red. Too fast. Like something was drinking it. I backed away, but the chamber felt tilted toward the door. Like gravity existed here and it hated me. I grabbed a pipe to anchor myself. I could hear movement now. Slow shifting from those seated shapes, like they were turning their heads to follow me. My comms crackled again. Mara's voice, distorted and frantic. I see a light. Where are you? Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Mara! I shouted into bubbles. Don't! Static swallowed my warning. The whispering laughed softly, like it enjoyed that. The father voice turned gentle again, and it hurt worse than the fear. It's using me. Your note was right. Don't trust the voice. Trust what you do next. What do I do? I whispered. The answer came like a confession. Give it your hook. I understood immediately. The hook was the watch, the proof, the thing I came for, the object turning my grief into a leash. No, I breathed. That's all I have. It's not, he said quietly. It's what keeps me missing. Missing means maybe. Let me be gone. My chest cracked. The doorway whispered my name again. My mother's voice returned, crying now. Please, please just open it. My air alarm screamed. I saw it clearly then. The ship didn't have to drown you. It just had to make you choose wrong while desperate. My hands trembled as I pulled out the watch. The cracked face stared back at me like an eye. I held it, and for a second I wanted to keep it forever, to anchor my father in something solid. Then I thought of Mara trapped somewhere in collapsing corridors because I couldn't accept reality. I opened my fingers and let the watch drift. The moment it left my hand, the chamber reacted like an animal. The hum changed pitch. The whispering turned angry. The door slammed halfway shut, like it was losing control of me. Now, my father's voice barked. The grip on my wrist yanked me toward the slit. I kicked hard, squeezing into the gap, tank scraping, shoulder catching. Something cold grabbed my fin from behind. Fingers like ice, nails scratching rubber. I kicked free and felt the grab slip away like it didn't want to waste effort if it couldn't own me. The ship groaned again, and the chamber shook. Photos on the walls fluttered. Wait, photos? My light flashed, and I saw them for the first time. Waterlogged family photos, pinned to the metal like bait. Weddings, babies, smiling faces, and among them, a photo of me as a kid on the dock with my dad. A photo that never left our home. My stomach dropped. The ship kept pieces. It learned people. It remembered. I crawled through the slit with my lungs burning, following the pull like a lifeline. Then I burst back into the cargo bay, and Mara's light cut through the silt like a knife. She grabbed me so hard it hurt, and shoved her backup regulator into my mouth. I sucked air like I'd been reborn. Her eyes were furious and terrified at the same time. The wreck groaned again, louder. Mara signaled, out! We didn't have the guideline. We didn't have a clear path. We had collapsing metal and instinct. Mara led like she'd memorized the ship in 10 seconds, twisting through gaps, cutting around debris. Twice I got snagged, and she ripped me free. Once she got caught on a wire, and I had to slice it with my knife while she kicked helplessly. My heart tried to climb out of my throat. Then ahead, a faint ribbon of blue. Daylight leaking through a torn section of hull. We kicked toward it as the ship groaned behind us like it was angry we weren't staying. We shot out into open water, and the ocean instantly felt louder and freer, like we'd escaped someone's mouth. We surfaced too fast, didn't care, crawled onto the boat coughing, ripping masks off, gasping air that tasted like metal and victory. Mara slammed her fist onto the deck and screamed, "What did you hear?" I couldn't answer. I was shaking too hard. I pulled out the waterproof case with trembling fingers and gave her the note. She read it. "Don't trust the voice." Her face tightened. Then she pointed at my wrist. Under the glove line was a fingerprint bruised into my skin. 5 fingers and a thumb, clear as a stamp. Mara stared at it for a long second, then looked away like she didn't want her brain to finish that thought. "That can be pressure marks," she said, but her voice didn't believe her. We sat there, wet and silent, while the boat rocked and the sea pretended to be innocent. Mara picked up the sealed recorder from the case and said, "If this is his, we listen now." She turned it on. Static. Then my dad's voice filled the air. Real, recorded, not the sea's imitation. He sounded tired, older than I remembered. "If you found this," he said, "you're already too close. The ship learns you. It gives you a voice back. It gave me my father's voice once. I followed it. That's how it keeps you. It doesn't need chains. It only needs you to want something enough." I covered my mouth, shaking. The recording continued. "It will use my voice. It will use your mother's voice. It will use anything. I left the chest as bait so you'd have proof. But proof becomes a leash. If you want to live, you have to do what I couldn't. You have to let me be gone." The recorder clicked off. The silence afterward was brutal. Mara started the engine without looking at me. The boat turned away from the coordinates. I stared at the surface behind us, expecting to see that seam again, that wrong line in the water. It was gone. Like the wreck had never existed, like it moved when it wanted. That night, back on land, I scrubbed my wrist in the shower until my skin burned, trying to erase the fingerprint like it was a hallucination. It stayed. Hours. And right before it finally faded, I saw something faint pressed into my skin under where the thumb had been. A tiny triangle inside a circle, like the sea had signed me, like it was saying, "I know you now." And the worst part is, if I'm honest, the most terrifying thing wasn't that the wreck tried to trick me. It was that for 1 second, when I heard my dad's voice in my ear telling me to come closer, I wanted to believe it more than I wanted to live.
I always thought the photo was beautiful in a lonely kind of way. Just a campfire burning in the snow, with a jagged mountain looming in the distance and the sky fading into blue-gray dusk. It was the last thing my sister ever sent me. She messaged it in the group chat with 3 words, "We made it." The timestamp said 1742. At 1803, every phone belonging to the 4 of them went offline at the same time. No goodbye, no call for help, no frantic last message, just silence. The rescue teams found their car parked neatly at the trailhead, locked, keys inside the glove compartment like they had expected to return any minute. What they didn't find was any sign of them. No tracks, no tent, no backpacks. Even the ashes of the campfire were gone, as if the picture itself had been taken in a place that didn't fully exist. The police said avalanche, despite there being no debris and no disturbed snow. People online said they probably slipped and fell into a crevasse. But when I zoomed in on that picture, really zoomed in, I noticed details nobody else cared about. There were boot prints around the fire. Several sets, yes. But there was also a second set of marks, long grooves, as if something had been dragged across the snow, or as if something with too many limbs had crawled close enough to bask in the warmth. When I pointed it out, Everyone said I was grieving and seeing patterns that weren't there. Maybe they were right, but the town had a story, one I'd heard as a kid, and laughed off. They called it the Ember Trail. They said that long before the road and the ski resort, the mountain used to be a place of offerings. In winter, when storms buried the village, hunters would hike up to the valley and light a fire in the snow, leaving food, handmade figures, and sometimes, according to the darkest versions of the story, people. The thing in the white, they called it. No face, no voice, just a presence that came when fire met untouched snow. If the offering pleased it, the winter would be mild. If not, people disappeared. The old people muttered about it in the bar, but only when they'd had enough to drink. My sister knew all those stories. She was obsessed with them, actually. That's why she went up there with her friends to make a true crime documentary about how urban legends blend with real cases of missing hikers. She wanted to prove there was a rational explanation for everything. Instead, she became part of the legend. I held on for 6 months, expecting a call, a clue, anything. When nothing came, I did the only thing that ever made the slightest sense. I tried to follow them. The first thing I did was trace their route. I checked her email, her laptop, her notes. They'd parked at the trailhead, then hiked north across the valley, planning to camp in a natural bowl where the wind supposedly couldn't reach them. The exact coordinates were scribbled in her notebook, accompanied by a little doodle of a campfire and a mountain silhouette that looked precisely like the one in the picture. A week later, I drove up alone, my car's headlights cutting through the drifting snow like weak flashlights in a sea of white. The road had that oppressive quiet that only mountains in winter have. No insects, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of tires and distant groaning of ice. At the trailhead, I stepped out into air so cold it felt solid in my lungs. Their car was gone, obviously, but the parking lot looked the same. A wooden sign warned about sudden weather changes, thin ice, and steep slopes. Nobody had bothered to put up a sign warning about legends that eat people. I checked my gear compulsively: GPS, satellite phone, spare batteries, flares, extra layers, enough food for days. It all felt theatrical, like I was preparing for an adventure instead of walking into the outline of a nightmare. I snapped a photo of the empty lot and sent it to my friend Mark with the words, "I'm going in. If I don't text by tomorrow afternoon, call the ranger station." He replied with a thumbs up and a, "You're insane." Maybe I was. I followed the trail markers at first, but there were no fresh footprints, just a soft wind smoothing the snow into gentle waves. As I climbed higher, the trees thinned, and the mountain began to dominate the horizon, exactly like in the picture. The sky turned the same dull blue-gray, clouds smeared thin like dirty cotton. The further I went, the less my phone wanted to work. No signal, just a blinking icon and a growing pit in my stomach. I told myself it was fine. The satellite phone would cover anything serious. Still, every time the GPS took half a second too long to refresh my position, my heart seized up. I reached the valley just as the last daylight was fading. The wind dropped to nothing, leaving a strange, humming silence in its place, like the world was holding its breath. The valley looked exactly like the photo, a broad, open field of untouched snow, ringed by dark pines, with the mountain rearing up over everything like some ancient animal preparing to pounce. I stopped at the spot my GPS said matched my sister's camp coordinates. I stood there for a long time, turning slowly in circles. No tent stakes, no broken branches, no discarded gear, just snow, smooth and undisturbed. But when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear their laughter, the crackle of their fire, the click of my sister's camera as she captured that last perfect shot. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I wanted to recreate exactly what they did, step for step. Maybe because a part of me still believed that if I repeated their actions, I could somehow reverse them, like running a film backward. I cleared a circle in the snow, gathered dead branches from the tree line, and built a small, neat campfire. For a few seconds I hesitated with the lighter in my hand, remembering every whisper about how it came when the fire burned in the snow. Then I told myself legends were just stories, flicked the lighter, and touched the flame to the dry bark. The fire caught quickly, orange light licking at the darkness, heat stinging my face. For a moment, it was almost peaceful. The snow around it glowed faintly, reflecting the flames. The mountain watched, unmoving. I set up my tent a few meters away, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I sat on a log, hugging my knees near the fire, listening to the little pops and crackles, and trying not to imagine my sister sitting there too. I took out the printed copy of her photo, held it up, and compared the angles. The mountain was the same, the shape of the valley, the distant line of trees, all identical, except for one thing. In her photo, between two trees on the left, there was a faint, dark smudge I'd always assumed was just a shadow. But now, when I looked up at the actual tree line, that shadow wasn't there. The space between those two trees was empty. My heart kicked hard. I lowered the photo, raised it again, lowered it. In the picture, the smudge seemed taller than person, narrower, like someone had dragged a streak of black ink down the image. My hands were shaking slightly now, and not from the cold. I was about to shove the photo back into my pocket when a gust of wind I hadn't felt come and sent a wave of sparks into the air. The fire guttered, then flared brighter, as if fed by some invisible oxygen. And then, from the exact spot between those trees, I saw movement. At first, it was just a ripple in the air, like heat distortion on a hot road. But the temperature was well below freezing. The distortion thickened, darkened, stretching upward until it formed a tall, thin silhouette. It looked as if something was wearing the forest like a cloak, its edges dripping into the snow. I told myself it was my eyes, my grief, the way the firelight flickered, anything but what it looked like, a shadow stepping free of the trees. It didn't walk, it slid, each movement gliding over the surface of the snow without disturbing it. The closer it got, the more wrong its shape seemed. Too tall, limbs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle as if it were listening to something buried beneath the ice. I tried to stand, but my knees refused. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to douse the fire, to do anything else but sit frozen as it approached. As it drew close enough for the firelight to touch its form, I finally saw it clearly. There were no features, no eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just a smooth black surface that swallowed light like a hole in the world. But as it stopped on the far side of the fire, something moved within that darkness, shifting like embers under ash. Then I heard it, not with my ears exactly, but inside my head, like a memory forced to the surface. "You brought a flame," a voice said, layered and distant, as if dozens of voices were trying to speak in unison but couldn't quite sync. "A dead was left, a line unfinished. You came to close it." My teeth chattered so hard, I thought they might crack. "Where is my sister?" I managed to get out. It tilted its head more, listening. Then the snow next to it stirred, and a hand broke the surface. A human hand, pale and shaking. Another followed, and another. One by one, people pulled themselves out of the snow like swimmers, emerging from thick, white water. I recognized my sister first. Her hair, her jacket, almost the little scar on her eyebrow. Her eyes were open but empty, pupils blown wide. Behind her came her three friends, and behind them, more and more faces that didn't belong to my time. Old hiking gear, outdated clothes, some in tattered uniforms I didn't recognize, dozens of them standing silently in a half circle around the fire, The shadow thing loomed behind them like a puppeteer. My sister took one step forward, the snow nut crunching under her boots. Her lips moved stiffly, as if the muscles forgot how to work. "You shouldn't have come," she said, voice slow, as if dragged up from somewhere deep and cold. "We tried not to call you. We tried not to remember you, but the mountain remembers, the fire remembers. It needed someone to finish it." "Finish what?" I whispered. She blinked once, the movement mechanical. "The offering." The word hung in the air like frost. Behind her, the faces of the others turned toward me in unison. Their eyes weren't empty after all. They were full of something terrible and desperate and trapped. They weren't simply dead. They were being used. The shadow behind them pulsed, and I felt pressure build inside my skull like fingers pressing into my brain. Images flashed through my mind. An ancient village buried in snow. People kneeling around a fire with something huge and shapeless hovering above them, their breath freezing as they chanted. A child being pushed forward, screaming, the fire flaring, the snow swallowing the sound. "Long ago, they bought their winters," the many-voiced whispers said. "They paid in lives and flames. They bound us to the pact, one fire in the snow, one soul claimed, and the storm would sleep. Then they forgot. They stopped paying. But the mountain remembers. The ledger is not balanced." My eyes burned with tears that froze on my lashes. "Take me then," I said, because what else was there? "Let the others go. Let her go." My sister flinched at that, the first real reaction I'd seen. The shadow's head swiveled slowly, considering. "One flame for many winters," it murmured. "One flame for many lives. It is inefficient, unfair." The chorus of voices shifted like different years, arguing with each other. Finally it said, "We will take what is owed all at once. You opened the way by bringing the flame. You lit the last fire. Now the snow will not sleep. Not here. Not anywhere you go." The ground shuddered under my feet. Cracks spider-webbed out from the fire pit, black lines splitting the white surface. The people around me began to sink, their bodies dragged down as if the snow had turned to liquid. My sister reached toward me as she sank, her expression twisting for the first time into something like pain. "Run," she whispered, but her voice was layered with the others, distorting the word. I stumbled backward, tripping over a buried rock. The fire roared higher, flames turning an unnatural deep blue, and the cracks chased out across the valley like veins. The last thing I saw before turning and bolting toward the trees was the shadow, leaning over the blue flames, stretching taller, as if finally, after all these years, it was fully awake. I ran without looking back, lungs burning, ears filled with the sound of snow collapsing, and something huge shifting underneath it. When I finally dared to stop, I was deep in the forest, the valley hidden behind a wall of pines. The ground here was untouched, solid. The mountain loomed, but the air felt thinner, less suffocating. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing, my breath tearing from my chest in ragged clouds. I stayed like that until the first gray hints of dawn. When I finally made it back to the parking lot, the world was disturbingly normal. A couple of tourists were unloading skis, laughing, breath steaming in the cold air. A plow rumbled past, clearing the road. Nobody seemed to notice that the sky over the ridge was a shade darker than it should have been, as if stained. The rangers I'd warned months ago listened patiently as I babbled about cracks in the snow, voices, my sister's face. They exchanged glances, wrote words like trauma and delayed grief in their report, and escorted me to town. They checked the valley by helicopter that afternoon. Everything looked fine on their cameras. No cracks, no campfire, no sign of disturbance. Just the same flat, perfect snow they'd seen 6 months ago. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The first sign came 3 days after I returned home. I woke up in the middle of the night to the faint smell of smoke. Not cigarette smoke, not from the neighbors. Campfire smoke. Dry wood, pine resin, that particular scorched sweetness. I stumbled into the living room, half expecting to see flames, but everything was dark. The smell faded as quickly as it came. The second sign came a week later. I was walking home from work, snowflakes drifting lazily down, when I noticed something in the reflection of a shop window. Behind me, across the street, there was a narrow alley between two buildings. In the glass, the alley looked wrong, darker, stretched like the photo my sister had taken. I turned around. The alley was empty. When I looked back at the reflection, the dark, tall smudge was still there, sliding a little closer. After that, I stopped checking reflections. I tried to forget and failed. I moved apartments, changed routes, slept with the lights on. None of it helped. Sometimes, in completely ordinary places, a parking lot, a quiet street, a park after dusk, I would look down and see a thin line etched in the snow at my feet, like the first crack in a sheet of ice. If I stepped away, it would vanish. If I stared, I could hear the faintest echo of that layered voice. One flame, many winters. The worst part? Winters are getting stranger, not just in my town. Storms that were supposed to last days are dying overnight. Cold snaps end abruptly without warning. People in different regions report strange localized blizzards that appear for an hour and then vanish, leaving behind odd circular patterns in the snow where nothing will grow come spring. On the news, they call it climate chaos. In my bones, I know better. We didn't pay for those mild winters before. We're paying now. The ledger is being balanced everywhere all at once, and I was the one who lit the last fire in the snow, the one that woke it fully. My sister's photo is still on my phone. Sometimes I open it, zoom in past the campfire, past the boot prints, to that shadow between the trees. Each time I look, it seems a little clearer, a little closer to the camera. Tonight, as I stare at it again, the power flickers. The heater cuts off, and the room temperature drops so fast I can see my breath. Outside my window, snow has started falling, thick and heavy, even though the forecast said clear skies. The glass fogs over, and written there in a thin line of frost as if traced by an invisible finger from the other side is a single word: offering. I grab my coat and head for the door because I know what comes next. Somewhere, in some quiet valley or empty backyard or lonely parking lot, someone else will decide to light a harmless little campfire in fresh snow, just to stay warm, just to take a pretty picture. And when they do, I know that Shadow will be waiting, ledger in hand, eager to finish what I started. I never believed in the stories about the Siltwood Forest until the night I set my campfire under its trees. Everyone in town called it different names: Dead Man's Timber, the Whisper Mile, the Vanishing Pines. But the legend was always the same. Once a year, on a cold night when the sky was completely clear and the moon looked a little too small, a fire would appear on its own somewhere among the trees, burning without wood, without smoke, and if you followed it, you wouldn't come back the same. As a kid, I thought that was just something adults made up so we wouldn't sneak into the forest to drink. And as I grew older, I decided if there was anything scary in there, it was the wild boars and the occasional drunk hunter. So when my friend Milo challenged me to spend one full night alone near the heart of Siltwood and stream parts of it for our tiny horror podcast, I laughed and agreed immediately. We'd done haunted houses, abandoned motels, ruined factories. Nothing ever happened. The most we ever caught was an owl flying too close to the camera. Honestly, I thought Siltwood would be the same. A creepy vibe, some good audio for the show, maybe a couple of jokes about ghosts around a campfire, then home with a story about how stupid the myth was. I started walking just after sunset, following the old logging road, a backpack over my shoulders, my phone on 90% battery, a power bank, a small tripod for the camera, and a bundle of dry wood I'd bought from a gas station. The air got colder as I moved away from the last orange street light, and the trees swallowed the remaining light quickly, their trunks packed tight like bars of a cage. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just the crunch of my boots and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. After maybe 40 minutes, I reached the point my grandfather had always called the last safe tree. A crooked pine marked with a rusty horseshoe nailed into its bark. He used to tell me, "Don't ever step past that horseshoe at night. You might come back, but you won't be alone." That memory drifted through my mind like smoke as I ran my fingers over the cold metal. It felt rough, eaten by rust. When I checked my GPS, the signal flickered once and then steadied. I told the stream, "All right, this is it, the famous last safe tree. According to local superstition, beyond this point, your grandpa's ghost charges you rent. Let's go see if he wants to be on camera." My chat bar at the bottom of the screen filled with a few laughing emojis from the 3 people watching: Milo, our mutual friend Kay, and some random username I didn't recognize. The road thinned to a narrow path marked with the pale bones of old tire ruts, barely visible in the dim light. Eventually the path gave way completely to raw forest floor, littered with needles, dark leaves, and stumps. I walked until my GPS told me I was near the center of Siltwood. That's where the legend said the phantom fire liked to appear. Finding a relatively flat area between 4 tall pines, I dropped my backpack, set up the tripod, and panned my phone slowly around the clearing. The camera struggled with the low light, turning the trees into blurred pillars. "Here's where I'm camping tonight," I said. "If any glowing-eyed forest demons want to sign a release form, now's the time." No response, obviously. I set some rocks in a loose circle, piled my store-bought logs and some collected twigs into a teepee shape, and flicked the lighter. It took a moment, but eventually the flames caught and began to climb, orange light licking upwards, pushing the darkness back just enough to make the forest look even deeper. Shadows stretched between the trees, long and thin, shifting every time the fire popped. I angled the camera so both the flames and the surrounding woods were in frame. Then I sat on my rolled sleeping bag, opened a thermos of coffee, and started talking into the mic about the history of Siltwood, at least in the pieces I remembered. Hunters finding empty tents with warm ashes still in the fire pit. Hikers hearing music on windless nights. A search party that followed a distant glow and found no fire, just a ring of stones and a blackened patch of dirt that was still hot. While I talked, the forest stayed quiet. Too quiet. Even the crackling of the fire seemed muted, like the trees were absorbing the sound. After about an hour, the chat died down. Milo sent a final, "Dude, if you see anything move, zoom in. Don't be a coward," and logged off. Kay was already gone. Only the random username Emberwatcher remained, dropping the occasional dot in the chat every couple of minutes as if to say, "I'm still here." At first I thought it was some bot. I joked, "Shout out to our mysterious lurker. If you're a ghost, don't break my phone. It's on payments." No reply, just another single dot. Eventually my phone battery dipped to 40%, and I stopped streaming, saving power for the rest of the night. After turning the screen off, the clearing felt different, like I'd closed a window, and the forest had stepped closer. Everything was darker, except the fire, which danced a little stronger now that the air had cooled more. I fed it another log, watched the sparks swirl up into the black canopy. That's when I first noticed it, the feeling that I was not alone. Now, I know people say that a lot when they try to sound dramatic, but this wasn't just nerves. It was physical, a pressure on my skin, like static. The hairs on my arms lifted. It felt as though the forest had exhaled and something had woken up, and that something had just turned its attention toward me. I listened closely. Nothing. Not a single leaf moved. The fire popped softly, sending a tiny shard of glowing ember onto the dirt, where it faded away. "You're fine," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. you're alone. It's just a story. But the sensation of being watched wouldn't go. Instead, it focused, as if coming from one direction. I found myself staring at a particular tree a few meters away, a thick trunk slightly wider than the others, bark peeling in long strips. The shadows around it seemed denser. The firelight didn't quite reach behind it, leaving a vertical wedge of pure black. My brain kept insisting something was standing there, just out of sight, pressed against the far side of the trunk and peering around at me. I shook my head, laughing nervously. Classic horror brain, I said aloud, reaching for my phone again. The lock screen glowed, and for a split second, I saw a reflection of the clearing in the glass. The fire, the ring of trees, my own silhouette, and there, behind me in that same direction, two small pale glints, like animal eyes, too high off the ground. I spun around. Nothing, just the tree. My heart pounded harder than I wanted to admit. "All right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I started recording again, this time just locally. "We may be experiencing what scientists call the oh shit. I'm an idiot alone in a haunted forest effect." I zoomed in on the tree. On camera, the bark looked normal, but the dark sliver behind it still seemed unnaturally black. "If anyone is watching this later," I went on, "take a look and see if you spot anything I don't." Maybe my subconscious picked up on something. I lowered the phone, and that was when I heard it. A faint crack from the left, like a weight shifting on a branch. Not animal light, but careful. Measured. I angled the phone that way, my other hand feeling around for the flashlight. The darkness beyond the fire's reach swallowed everything. My beam was weak, washed out. But I swept it across the trunks anyway, left to right. Nothing moved. The beam caught something reflective at ground level. Just a discarded glass bottle, half buried in leaves. I let out a slow breath, feeling stupid for how fast my pulse was racing. To calm myself, I decided to check the time. When I tapped the screen, my phone flickered, then showed 23:17. "Almost midnight," I murmured. Then I noticed the signal bars. No service. That was expected this deep, but what wasn't expected was the small notification at the top. "Live stream ended, 02:13:49. Over 2 hours of streaming. That wasn't right. I'd started around 9 and stopped a little after 10. I frowned, scrolling through the saved file, and the timeline showed nearly 2 hours and 14 minutes of footage. I scrubbed through quickly, thumb dragging along the bar. The first hour looked exactly how I remembered. Me walking, setting up camp, telling the story of Siltwood. But right after the point where I announced I was ending the stream, the video kept going. The camera stayed pointed at the campfire. I watched my recorded self stand up, yawning, and walk toward the edge of the clearing. That definitely hadn't happened. In reality, I'd stayed put, feeding the fire, talking to chat. Yet on the video, I watched myself vanish into the dark. The fire remained in frame, crackling quietly. About 20 seconds later, a shape moved at the very edge of the light. A tall, thin silhouette, half obscured by the trunk of that same tree I'd been staring at. It leaned forward, just enough for the glow to catch a slick, pale face, with eyes reflecting like coins at the bottom of a well. Then the recording glitched, one smear of digital noise, and cut off. "What the hell?" I whispered. I knew memory could be unreliable, but not like this. I was certain I had never walked away from the fire. Yet here, clear as day, was footage of me doing exactly that, and something else watching patiently. Before I could process it any further, a notification jumped onto the screen. It shouldn't have been possible with no service, but it was there, plain and simple. From Ember Watcher. Message: "Don't follow it this time." A cold weight settled in my stomach. My thumb hovered over the notification. No name, no number, no app listed. Just the text, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I blinked once, and the message vanished, leaving no trace in any inbox or chat log. I checked everything. Nothing. My hands were shaking. The fire suddenly felt too small, too fragile. I tossed another log on, watching the flames climb higher, as if more light could somehow erase the strangeness. But the fire didn't burn the way it should. The new wood caught instantly, no crackle, no smoke, just a clean orange rise, as if it had been burning for hours already. I stepped closer and realized the log from earlier, the one I knew I'd just placed, was almost completely charred, as though time had sped up for it and nothing else. I grabbed a stick and poked it, and the whole structure collapsed inward in a shower of embers, exposing a ring of blackened stones underneath that I hadn't arranged. Someone else had built a fire here long before me, the exact same spot. The idea that I was sitting in the footprint of someone else's forgotten night made the air feel thinner. I looked around the clearing again, searching for any sign of old camps, a rusted can, a scrap of tarp, anything. That's when I saw the mark on one of the trees, about at eye level. At first, I thought it was just a knot, but when I moved closer, I saw it was carved. 3 short vertical lines with a longer line slashing through them, like 4 tally marks. The bark around it was darkened, as if burned by something hot pressed against it for a long time. I swept my flashlight around and found the same symbol on another tree, then another. 4 trees surrounding the clearing, each with 4 slashes. 16 marks total. I counted them twice. 16. It felt like a number meant to mean something. 16 nights. 16 fires. 16 people. Stop it, I muttered, but the back of my neck prickled as though unseen fingers were hovering just above the skin. The sensation drew my attention back to the tree near the edge of the firelight, the one that made my instincts scream. As I watched, the darkness behind it seemed to bend slightly, like heat haze over asphalt, even though the air was cold. The space thickened, shadows stretching, and for a heartbeat I saw something tall and narrow there, a vertical smear of black, darker than the night itself, with 2 pale, coin-bright eyes hanging in the void. Then I blinked, and it was gone again. I tried to rationalize. Sleep deprivation, too much caffeine, suggestibility from all the stories. But then, from somewhere deeper in the forest, I heard it, the crackle and pop of another campfire. Faint, but unmistakable. Not thunder, not branches, not trucks on a faraway road, fire. And beneath that sound, just barely audible, a voice, or multiple voices, talking, laughing. For a second I thought Milo had followed me to prank me. "Very funny," I shouted into the trees. "You almost got me. Come out before I throw this camera at you." The voices didn't answer. They kept going, low and indistinct, like a conversation heard through a wall. I grabbed my flashlight and took a few steps toward the sound, then stopped. The notification from Ember Watcher echoed in my mind. Don't follow it this time. This time. As if I'd done it before, as if I'd already made that mistake. I turned back toward my fire. It was burning lower, almost too low. If I stayed here, it would eventually die out, leaving me in pitch blackness. If I went toward the other fire, maybe I'd find people, safety. Or maybe I'd walk straight into something that had been planning this all along. My heart hammered against my ribs. I decided to compromise. I'd move just close enough to see, not leave the radius of my own light completely. I stepped backward, keeping my eyes on the dark between the trees where the second fire's glow flickered faintly orange. But as I did, something strange happened. The distance between my fire and the other one never changed. It remained the same small patch of flickering gold in the distance, no matter how many steps I took. I kept walking, the crunch of leaves under my boots, my own fire shrinking behind me, the new one staying stubbornly far ahead. At some point, the ground beneath my feet turned softer, like I was stepping on ash instead of dirt. I looked down and saw charred black earth, scattered with half-burned logs, rusted cans, and the collapsed remnants of tents. I'd walked into a graveyard of old campsites, dozens of them, all in varying states of decay. Some circles of stones were nearly swallowed by moss. Others looked like they'd been used last week, but the second fire remained ahead, not any closer. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I spun around, intending to go back to my own camp. But behind me, where my fire should have been, there was nothing. Just more trees, more empty rinks of stone, more blackened soil. My throat tightened. I turned in a frantic circle, trying to find some familiar landmark. The crooked pine, the well of darkness behind the particular tree, anything. The forest looked the same in every direction, a maze of trunks and shadows. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. On impulse, I checked my phone again. The time read 23:17. Exactly. The same as before. I blinked, locked it, unlocked it. 23:17. No seconds ticking forward. Battery 40%. Signal none. And at the bottom of the screen beneath the icons, a new line of text glowed faintly, as if burned into the display. Live 00:00:03. I stared as the numbers ticked up 4, 5, 6. My phone thought it was live streaming again, even though no app was open. I swiped frantically, but every screen slid away to reveal the same thing, the word live and the timer counting upward. Then the audio on the phone crackled faintly, even though the speaker message was at minimum volume. Underneath the static, I heard my own voice. Not delayed, not echoing, but saying something completely different from what I was saying now. If you're hearing this, the other me whispered, that means you didn't listen. You followed the fire again. I brought the phone closer to my ear. The recorded version of my voice sounded strained, terrified, like someone speaking from underwater. It doesn't burn wood, it said. It burns time. Nights stacked on nights, people stacked on people. We keep walking in over and over, and we always think it's the first time. But it isn't. It's never the first time. A rustle behind me made me whirl around, heart in my throat. Between two trees I saw movement. Someone stepping forward, holding a lantern. My breath caught in relief. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, dressed in an old-style hiking jacket, hair tied back with a faded scarf. Thank God, I started lowering the phone. I got turned around. Do you know? She raised a hand, signaling for silence, eyes wide with a warning. Don't get too close, she said softly. Her voice shook. You're still on your side. My side, I repeated. What does that even mean? She swallowed, looking past me, her gaze fixed on something over my shoulder. How many fires did you see on your way in? She asked. Just mine, I said. And maybe another one. I'm not sure. I heard it. I saw the light. She nodded grimly. Then you're still early. You still think there's a way back. My skin crawled. Who are you? I was you, she said simply. 3 years ago. Or 3 nights. It's hard to tell here. Time doesn't behave. We came out here for a show too, for a video, for a dare. My friend went first. I followed the fire to find her. She gestured with the lantern toward the dark behind me. No, I can't leave that circle. Not completely. That's where it keeps me. I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. Slowly, I pivoted. Behind me, an orange glow pulsed faintly through the trees, larger than a single campfire, more like several small ones scattered together. Shadows moved around it, shapes, people. For a second it looked like a normal campground, tents, figures walking, someone sitting, someone lying down, but then the image blurred, stretched, like seeing a reflection on rippling water. I looked back at the woman, heart racing. What happens if I go there? I asked. You meet the others, she said. The ones who stayed. The ones who followed the sound, the ones who forgot they were in a story and started believing they were real. This is insane, I muttered. You're not real. Does it feel real? She snapped, a flicker of anger breaking through her fear. The ash under your boots, the cold in your fingers, the way your mouth tastes like smoke, the way every time you try to remember how long you've been here, it slips away. I tried to remember when I'd left the house, what song had been playing on the car radio, what I'd eaten for breakfast that morning. The images refused to line up, like puzzle pieces from different boxes. My head throbbed. Why me? I asked. Why anyone? Because we light the fire, she said. That's the invitation. This place is hungry, but it can't start on its own. It needs a spark. Once the campfire is burning, the forest can feed. A snapping sound came from behind her, deep in the dark. Her eyes widened. It heard me, she whispered. I stayed too long. I just wanted to see if anyone made it further than I did. She stepped back, and I saw for the first time that her lantern wasn't casting light normally. The glow formed a perfect circle at her feet, but outside that circle the darkness looked thicker, almost solid, pressing down on her shoulders like a weight. Her face flickered, as if seen through an old TV with bad reception. Listen, she said quickly. You're not at the start of your night. You're somewhere in the middle. It keeps cutting out the parts where you almost figure it out. It resets you to the campfire. That's why your clock doesn't move. That's why your stream kept going after you stopped. You keep walking away, over and over, and it keeps stitching those nights together. 16 marks on the trees. 16 versions of you, maybe more. I thought of the carved tally marks, of the graves of old camps. Why send me that message? I blurted. The one on my phone? Don't follow it this time. Was that you? She shook her head slowly. No, she said. That was you. One of the other yous. It doesn't just eat people. It eats the parts of them that still fight back. Sometimes the leftovers leak through. Her lantern dimmed suddenly, the flame inside sputtering without smoke. A wind I couldn't feel rustled her hair. It's coming, she whispered hoarsely. You have one chance left. Don't trust the light. Any of it. Put the fire out. Snuff it completely. If it can't see the spark, it can't anchor you here. How do I get back? I demanded. How do I leave the forest? She looked at me with something like pity. You don't walk out, she said. You'll remember your way out. With that, she stepped backward, and the darkness folded around her like curtains closing. The lantern's glow shrank, collapsed into a point, and then vanished altogether, leaving me alone in the cold, shallow beam of my flashlight. My breath steamed in front of me. I listened, straining for any trace of her. Footsteps, rustling, anything. Instead, I heard the sound of the distant fire swell, gaining volume like someone was turning a dial. The low murmur of voices rose again, weaving around each other, laughing, sobbing, screaming, whispering all at once. The forest ahead of me pulsed with an orange glow that seemed to beat like a slow, heavy heart. Don't trust the light, she'd said. Put the fire out. As if in response, my own phone screen lit up by itself, throwing harsh white into my face. The timer at the bottom had reached 001604. Next to it, a red chat icon popped up. I didn't open it, but the message preview slid down on its own. From Ember Watcher. You tried that already. My mouth went dry. I forced my thumb to tap the message. A window opened, black background, white text that wasn't part of any app I recognized. At the top, in small letters, it said, Silt would live. Subscribers, 16. Then comment lines began to appear, each one tagged with my own username. All the same name. All me. Put it out. Follow it. Run. Stay. Ask about the well. Don't mention the well. My vision blurred. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, a new line had appeared at the bottom, still tagged with my name. But the text was typing itself, letters appearing one by one. Look behind the tree. I didn't want to. Every instinct in my body screamed at me not to. But the compulsion was stronger, like the moment before you touch a sore tooth with your tongue. Slowly, I turned my head toward the tree that had haunted me since I arrived, the one near my original clearing. Even though I had walked away from it, it was right there in front of me, as if the forest had rearranged itself so I could see. The darkness behind it had thickened into a vertical pool of ink, and from that pool a figure was slowly emerging. Tall, too tall, limbs too long, as if someone had grabbed a normal human and stretched them upwards like taffy. Its skin, or what passed for skin, was the color of wet bark, slick and root-veined. His head was wrong, tilted slightly forward, eye sockets glowing with a dim, ember-like light. As it stepped fully out from behind the tree, the firelight from the distant blaze bent toward it, as if being sucked in. Every color in the forest seemed to drain away, leaving only shades of gray and the orange reflection in its eyes. My phone vibrated in my hand. Another message from Ember Watcher. Don't run. It likes that. I stood frozen as the creature's gaze swept over the dead camps, the blackened soil finally landing on me. When our eyes met, a rush of images slammed into my mind. A boy in the 70s lighting a campfire with matches stolen from his father's jacket. A pair of teenagers in the 90s filming each other on a grainy camcorder, daring each other to stay until dawn. A woman in a red raincoat crying quietly as she fed the flames, whispering apologies to no one. Different clothes, different languages, different voices, but the same clearing, the same circle of stones, the same tree. The thing smelled like them, like old smoke trapped in fabric, like scorched hair, like all the fear that had ever soaked into this place. It took another step toward me, and I realized its feet weren't disturbing the ground. It wasn't walking on the forest floor. It was walking on something layered above it, a thin sheet of dark that shimmered with faint moving reflections. Faces rippled across it for a second, screaming, laughing, sleeping, but then the surface smoothed, and it was just empty black again. "What do you want?" I whispered, though some part of me already knew. The answer wasn't spoken in words. It arrived like the echo of my own voice, bouncing back from a very long tunnel. Stay. Not because it liked me, not because it needed company, but because that was what it did. That was its nature, like gravity or mold or rot. It kept, it gathered, it repeated, and the fire was its doorway. I thought of the woman with the lantern telling me to put it out, of the comment telling me I'd already tried. I forced my eyes away from the creature and looked toward the distant glow of the other fire. It was brighter now, flickering wildly, shapes moving around it. For a heartbeat, I swore I saw myself sitting there, hunched over, holding my phone up as if recording, unaware of the tall shadow standing behind a nearby tree, a loop feeding itself. If I ran for the distant fire, I'd end up there again, starting over. Another version of me added to the tally marks. If I did nothing, the thing in front of me would eventually reach me anyway. I had one hand free, the other clutching the phone like a lifeline. Inside my backpack, I remembered there was a small metal flask of rubbing alcohol for cleaning cuts, and a cheap survival blanket. None of that would help. But there was also something else. A flare. Milo had tossed it in as a joke, saying, "If the ghosts like fire so much, give them a real show." An idea sparked in my mind, dangerous and probably stupid. The fire was its anchor, but what if I gave it more than it could handle? Something brighter, harsher. Something that didn't burn clean and slow, but exploded in one overwhelming blaze. Maybe I couldn't put the fire out, but maybe I could make it lose its grip on this particular version of me. I dropped the phone into my pocket and slowly lowered my backpack to the ground, never taking my eyes completely off the creature. It watched me with patient curiosity. Head tilting slightly, as if wondering which choice I would make this time. My fingers found the zipper, then the cool metal cylinder of the flare. I pulled it out, feeling its weight, its promise. My thumb hovered over the cap. "You want me to stay?" I whispered, more to myself than to it. "But you never said how." I yanked the cap off the flare and struck it. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a blinding, searing red light erupted with a hiss, so bright it turned the world into jagged, oversaturated shapes. The creature recoiled, the glow in its eyes flaring white as if in surprise. The distant campfire paled in comparison, its light drowned in the flood of crimson. Shadows spasmed and twisted, like fleeing animals. I held the flare high, arm burning with the effort, and stepped toward the creature instead of away. It stepped back, only a little, but enough. The ground beneath our feet shivered. the layers of accumulated nights and lives rippling like liquid. For the first time since I entered the forest, I heard something besides fire and my own breathing. I heard cracks, splits, like ice breaking on a lake at thaw. The world around us seemed to peel, revealing slivers of other nights underneath each tree, different arrangements of tents, different positions of the fire, different people. Some looked up, eyes wide, as if sensing me. Others sat motionless, unaware, their faces lit by their own fires. The more I stared, the more I saw that every version of the clearing was stacked on top of every other, all happening at once, with the creature standing in the middle like a nail driven through a shuffled deck of cards. I screamed, though I don't remember deciding to. The sound came out raw and terrified, and I rammed the burning flare into the nearest circle of blackened stones, on the spot where my original fire had been, where all the other fires seemed to intersect. The moment the flare touched the ash, the forest inhaled. Every flame in every version of the clearing flared high at once, towering columns of fire punching upward into the night. The creature let out a sound. Not a roar, not a scream, but something like a grinding echo of all the voices I'd heard layered together. The ground buckled, time slipped. For a few wild, spinning seconds, I was standing in every night at once. The boy in the 70s, the teens in the 90s, the woman in the red raincoat, the version of me who had already failed, the version who had already given up, the one who had run, the one who had knelt, the one who had laughed at the last second in total denial. We were all there, all aware, all staring at the same flare jammed into the same circle of stones, and then, like a rubber band snapping, we weren't. I woke up on the side of the logging road, lying on my back, the sky above me pale with the first hint of dawn. The horseshoe tree stood a few meters away. My backpack was beside me, half open, its contents spilled out. The flare was gone. My phone lay face down on the gravel. Every muscle in my body ached like I'd been running for hours. My throat felt raw. My clothes smelled like smoke. When I picked up the phone, it was warm, almost hot. The screen lit up instantly. Time, 6:42. Date, the same day I'd left for the forest. No missed calls, no messages, no evidence of any live stream. The video files were gone. Every trace of my night in Siltwood had been wiped clean. Except for one thing. In my gallery there was a single new folder titled Siltwood. Inside there was just one image, no metadata, no timestamp. It showed a clearing in a forest at night, a campfire burning bright in the center. Whoever had taken the picture had stood just outside the circle of light, near the edge of the trees. In the foreground, slightly off-center, there was a figure sitting on a rolled sleeping bag, holding a phone up as if streaming, face lit orange by the flames. Me. And behind me, half hidden behind a thick tree trunk, was a tall, thin shadow with glowing eyes, watching patiently. At the bottom of the image, in small white text, was a single line, "Stream will resume shortly." I wanted to delete it, I really did, but my thumb hovered over the trash icon and refused to press down, as if the muscles wouldn't obey. Finally, I locked the phone, shoved it deep into my pocket, and stumbled back toward town, the early morning birdsong sounding thin and distant. I told everyone the trip was a bust, that my equipment failed, that there was nothing to upload. Milo joked that the real horror was wasting gas money for nothing. I laughed weakly and agreed. We never did another episode of the podcast. I tried to move on. I stopped going near the forest. I avoided campfires, even little ones in metal pits on patios. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the phone is on my nightstand, the screen lights up by itself. For just a second. long enough to show a notification I can never properly read, only feel. Something from an app that doesn't exist. A message from a username I don't recognize, Amber Watcher, and in the reflection on the black glass just behind my own tired face, I sometimes think I see a faint orange glow, a fire starting somewhere among very tall trees. The last time it happened, I finally grabbed the phone and unlocked it before the notification could disappear. The screen went white and then black. In the middle, in small letters, appeared a single question. Light it again. Two buttons faded into view beneath it. Yes and no. My thumb hovered in the middle, shaking. Because here's the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake. I don't know how many times I've already answered that question. I don't know if I am at the start of my story or somewhere in the middle. All I know is that in a forest not far from here, there's a clearing surrounded by trees marked with tally scratches, and sometimes, when the night is clear and the moon looks just a little too small, a fire appears there on its own and burns without smoke. If you ever see it, if you ever hear laughter and crackling where there should be only wind and branches, don't follow it. Don't try to stream it. Don't strike a match. Because the forest of Selwood doesn't care if you believe in myths or not. It only cares about one thing, and it's always hungry for another night.